and bring the power of your mind and the power of your understanding, the power of your knowledge as an offering to a suffering world.
Jung always talked about the round being an image of wholeness, an image of the self, the archetypal self. There are mixed the squareness, the roundness, the diameter, and the dimensions. This is geometry, friends. The dimensions, which restrain one another. Like I have told you, that the different elements have to restrain each other. It's not just the government that has to have checks and balances. Your psyche has to have checks and balances like a government that's functioning right. In fact, it would be interesting to think about the archetypal grounds of the different branches of government. Okay, but back to the quote, which restrain one another, having been in existence before the beginning of the heavens and the earth. That is, the squareness which restrains each other are archetypal. They're not personal. They've been in existence before the foundations of the earth. That is to say, that they are grounded archetypally. The author goes on to speak of a region, quote, closed on all sides. Now we're getting into the inner temple. Your structurally integrated little s self-system that through great effort you have created by working to balance the opposites. Its interior is made up of intercommunicating labyrinths. Intercommunicating labyrinths. Not one labyrinth, 4 labyrinths is what it's saying. There are 4 intercommunicating labyrinths. In this space, in this region, the implication is, quote, the protection for the adept, for the practitioner, for you, if you're in there doing your conscious sacrificial work, the protection is so complete as to turn back all that is devilish and undesirable. In other words, if you are in this inner temple and you're conscious and you're respectfully, authentically offering your offerings to the primal other, the satanic results or consequences of overflowing archetypal energy subsides. Do you get that? Are you with me on that? If you're in that balanced inner temple, authentically, consciously, respectfully, the satanic consequences of overflowing of archetypal energy subsides. When you're in this space, quote, cessation of thought is desirable, and worries are preposterous. The most important thing is not thought. You were saying the most important thing is not talking, but the most important thing is also not thought. What is important? It's the communion. It's being in the presence consciously, being with the primal other, being there and knowing you're there, knowing it's there, being respectful. This is a concrete representation of what Edinger talks about as when you have an ego archetype axis, when you have the ego self-axis. That is, this is what it really means to have an ego self-axis. And the worries are preposterous. This simply means that you're in the zone. You are in the synchronistic zone. This is what Jung has always affirmed, that if you're really in a right relationship with the archetypal self, synchronicities will tend to constellate. And there will be more of a creative flow to advance in your life. That is what the alchemist is affirming. Jung saw that, Edinger saw that. All the folks that are fascinated with synchronicity see that. Get this now. Quote, the divine chi fills the quarters. I think about what we've been saying. The divine chi, that's sacred energy, read that libido, fills the quarters, and it cannot be held back. I just got through telling you, it cannot be held back, right? It's going to flow into those 4 quarters. Whoever retains it will prosper. That is, whoever is able to utilize the chi that flows in there creatively will prosper. Why? Because it makes you creative, unimaginatively creative. These lion men and women that I work with, they are incredibly creative. That's not their problem, getting creative. The problem is not letting it go bad on them. And he says, and he who loses it will perish. If you listen to my lectures I gave recently as a predecessor to these on transforming fire, accessing and optimizing your spiritual energy, psychological spiritual energies, I point out in there that there's increasing evidence that you get ill, your immune system starts going down when your archetypal energy in your physical systems gets too low. Depression is an expression of the accessible archetypal energy, getting too low. Even the Bowen theorists, the Bowen systems theorists are arguing that now, based on their creative bridging of neurophysiology, recent brain research, and systems theory. They are arguing that we are all dealing with energy dynamics, and when the energy in the body gets to the point where it is not accessible at a fairly adequate level, you get not only depression, you get immune system problems. And the assumption being that for your immune system to function adequately, there's got to be enough qi. So what else is new, right? All the Chinese medical types tell us that. There's a lot of other scientific evidence that supports that now. So you can lose this qi by not having the four squareness of the temple set up, and it'll leak. Or you can lose the qi, and I think this is the one he's talking about. Get this now. I think the alchemist here is talking about the overflow of the qi, the wasted, the excess that's not dealt with consciously. Listen to this. For the latter, that means the one that's going to perish. Are you following me on this? You're getting what he's saying here and how it relates to what we've been talking about? For the latter will employ the, quote, false method, unquote. He's talking about the alchemical practitioner. Read that, personality or psychotherapist, who's employing the false method. Now let's listen to what the false method is. He will direct himself in all things by the course of the sun and stars. In other words, will lead a rationally ordered life in accordance with the rules of Chinese conduct. In other words, he attempts to function out of his ego. It's ego psychology. He's doing what he knows to be the right thing out of the best he knows about what to do about rational psychotherapy. See? But this is not pleasing to the Tao of the feminine principle, the yin. That is the part of the Tao which is not in the ego's activity. The part where you have to give over. You got to commune, right? And Jung continues, he says, or as we should say, the person is operating according to the ordering principles of consciousness. And these principles are not in harmony with the unconscious. If the practitioner at this point orders his life according to rules traditionally regarded as rational, he brings himself into danger. Operating out of the rational functioning of the ego, you're functioning as if you are the center, and there's no other important center you're supposed to be in communion with. You're running it. You're the master. You're in control. This, of course, is the definition of sorcery or black magic. When you're practicing all this stuff without reverence for the great other. And he says this, quote, "Disaster will come to the black mass," unquote. What is the black mass? It is a mass which is done without reverence for the great other, for one's own egocentric agenda. So what he's saying is, he says, the black mass is the massa confusa, the chaos of Western alchemy, the prima materia, which is like lead. It is the Qin Yin. That is, the Qin Yin is the whole man or person, hidden in the darkness, the whole man who is threatened by the rational and correct conduct of life. That is, so your whole person is threatened if you operate solely out of the ego. Individuation is hindered or deflected into the wrong path. So now picture this. This is what he's saying. This is exactly what we've been talking about this weekend. When a person is operating in this ego way, without reference to the communion with the great other, they're doing sorcery. And, quote, here's Jung continuing, the chi, there's the sacred energy, the libido, the quintessence, the rose-colored blood of Western alchemy, which he identifies with this libido, cannot be held back. And the self then struggles to make itself manifest and threatens to overpower consciousness. So in other words, when it overflows, the chi is going to come anyway. No matter if you're working out of your ego, the chi is going to come anyway. And it's going to threaten, it's going to become adversarial, and it's going to start making you act out. This danger was particularly great for the Western alchemist, because of the ideal of the imitation of Christ, the imitatio Christi, led him to regard the sweating out of a soul substance as a task that had actually been enjoined upon him. He felt morally obliged to realize the demands of the self, regardless of whether these demands taxed him too highly.